Okay, I believe we are live. I'm gonna double check on the LinkedIn. It's working. We might get some crazy feedback when I click on this link, so beware. Okay, confirmed. Perfect. Welcome, everybody. This is our third session this month on our release of DinoAI, which the easiest way to describe DinoAI is the cursor for data. So the AI agent that we've built in the Paradime IDE, we've had it for, has it been a year since we launched the original DinoAI?
It's
How's
been a
that,
year.
Fabio?
It's been a
About a
year.
year.
Yeah.
And it was useful back then, but in the last month and a half, it really has become spectacular. Um, Something I realized today is we've been doing a lot of these global hackathons where we bring a data set into Paradigm and we allow people from all over the world to build models around it and insights. And I would spend roughly 15 hours preparing those projects for people. Now with the new Dino AI, I think it would take about an hour. Towstuff will probably say it should take me 15 minutes, but I think we can settle on an hour that it would take.
I think we can settle on an hour for sure. For
Okay.
sure.
We'll time it. We'll be doing another one soon, but that really is the power of what we built with Dino AI recently. It can dramatically reduce your development time, um, and specifically around bringing in new data. It just makes that process so fast and painless and effective.
Yeah, like the last couple of days, I've been speaking to people who've been currently using Cursor, and their workflow looks like they're doing some development in Cursor. Then they get the data from there, get the code from there. They go and try to compile it in using dbt core. Then they compile, run it in the warehouse. Then they pick up the code, put it into Snowflake or somewhere to make it sure that it actually runs. Then they bring it back to Cursor, and then they generate a little bit more. So it's just kind of moving across 2 3 different tools again and again. And because Cursor doesn't know that you are on Snowflake or you are on BigQuery, you have one SQL. Part of it is BigQuery, part of it is Snowflake. So you are vibing, but not vibing for far too long, and the way I would probably describe it. So you kind of end up in like pretty horrendous situations when it comes to data work per se.
But even that process is a lot faster than what was being done before. But like how stuff said, the key difference now is with a cursor, it might not have context of where your source data is coming from, like a data warehouse, for example. And with Dino AI, we've included all that into the single platform. So while you're doing this vibe coding, which actually has a negative connotation now, maybe we switch it from vibe coding to something else that people don't get mad at. But in Paradigm, you're getting all the power of AI and all the context of your data warehouse. So
It
you're
just
not
becomes
switching from
magical.
tabs, testing things.
It just becomes magical, in my opinion. I think
Yeah, yeah.
it just becomes magical. I'm biased, but I think I'm rationally biased.
So today, Fabio is going to show us an additional feature with Dino AI that is around constraints and rules with a file called Dino AI rules. So, Fabio, if you're ready, we're ready to watch and listen.
Let's go. Let's jump in.
All right.
Awesome. So, first of all, yeah, super excited about Dino in general, and super excited also about what we've been launching this week with what we call dinorules. But to take a step back, I guess, in previous webinar or live stream, what we've been doing is working on the back of Formula One data, because I'm a massive Formula One fan, and start building our way up to setting up our projects, setting up our sources.yaml, working with our SQL files and data model to effectively build some analysis on the back of that. So picking up for that, one of the things that we build at Paradime with DinoAI is a set of additional toolkit you get out of the box to interact with your context in various different ways. Now, context for us is your project, is your repository, is your data warehouse. And now with the addition with dinorules, we can be a lot more explicit on what we want from our DinoAI agent. So going back to our project where we are, I know that I've added a bunch of new tables into my database. So the first thing I want to do very quickly here is I want to go through and see what is available to me. And I know that a couple of tables are missing. But one of the things we want to start with is around setting up our dinorules. So dinorules are additional set of configuration we can provide to the agent to make sure that when it's going to generate code for us, when it's going to generate documentation, and in the way how it interacts with our repository and DBT project, it will follow certain type of standard we want from our files. So the way it works is as simple as adding a .dinorule file in your repository. And I'm just going to paste a bunch of rules that I have here. And let's start with SQL style. So I want to make sure that whenever code is generated from Dino, we're always going to use uppercase for SQL keywords. We use training commas. We have proper indentation, snake case for naming convention. A bunch of things that I prefer personally in the way how my code should be generated. So this is the first step, right? And now what this allows us to do is that every time the DinoAI agent will generate code for us, it will start follow this structure and this standard. So let's go and take a look on how this actually works in practice. So first thing, we'll go to Dino. We have a completely revamped UI. We are already on agent mode. I want to go and add these sources that I know they're missing. And this is where we can now use our inline context to point to which source file we want to update. And I can go ahead and press enter. Again, what this allows us to do is to go to our database or our warehouse to look into the Formula One database to understand which tables are missing from my current sources.yaml, and effectively update our starting point, which is defining source in our project. This is a massive, painful task, I think, for every engineer nowadays. You're always going to keep adding and updating sources to your DBT project. You have always new table, new columns that have to come in. So the first thing we want to do is to go and update this. So I did find that I have 4 tables that currently are not into my YAML file for the sources. So we want to go ahead now and DinoAI is generating or updating the sources.yaml with these new tables. When this is done, we're going to go and create a bunch of SQL files. And we're going to see now how dinorules take precedence or are taken into account when we go and generate these files. So this is actually something very important, I think, with teams to make sure that we use certain best practices, make sure that we follow certain internal standards in the way how we want to document or in the way how we want to write our SQL. There are extremely powerful tools that we can provide our engineers to make sure that when working with SQL and DBT, we have a very standardized way to sort of like define our business logic. So very quickly here, my new tables have been added to my sources.yaml. In here, I can go ahead and click on accept, and we have our new table here. So in previous live stream, what my prompt was, hey, now that you added the source data, can you build my first DBT model? And I had to be explicit about making sure that DinoAI will do a bunch of renaming for those column names to make sure that they'll be more readable, right? With context and with the ability to provide dinorules, we actually don't need that anymore. And I think that's the beauty of it. So what I can do now is I'm going to just add another prompt here. It's okay, now can you create a new file in the folder called staging for the pit stop source data? So I can go ahead and press enter. Now let's see, based on our DORA rules, what kind of SQL we are going to get back from our Dino agent here. So it went on here and did a bunch of renamings and a bunch of things that we want. We didn't have to specify any of those additional naming convention that we wanted to keep and maintain in here. So I can go ahead and click on accept. So this is the first step on how we can actually use DinoAI to make sure that certain rules are applied within our way of defining SQL and working with SQL within this project as well. So so far so good. I think we've been able to kind of like go ahead and set up all these things for us. We didn't have to add any additional context to the agent itself. The next thing I want to do now is kind of like up our game a little bit. So I have a set of new instructions that I want to pull in and add here. So let's look this up. So let's go to this. So I've added a bunch of new things in here on top of the SQL ones, which is around documentation. So if I ask to create documentation on the back of my prompt, I want to make sure that I follow a certain type of conventions around the way how the YAML file should be created. I also want to have a naming convention about the SQL files that are created in there as well. And then I want to make sure that the agent is aware of using dimensional modeling best practices, calling, make sure to use surrogate key and confirm dimension, all these rules that we kind of like follow now today. And then the one that I'm pretty excited about it is around sometimes we want to see things visually, okay? So I added this additional rule in place here, which says, just there, but that alongside my SQL, if the agent is generating something a bit more complex to understand, something which is not super straightforward, we have multiple joins and things like that, what we want to make sure is that it will generate for us also a Mermaid diagram. So Mermaid diagrams is something that we support in Paradime, which allows you to visualize your data model using building things like ERD. They are written as code, which means that you can actually commit those ERD diagram within your repository. It means they're accessible to everyone. And I think it's pretty good to explain concept visually to other team members there. So let's go ahead now and let's do this. So I'm going to close a bunch of tabs here for now. Here, I'm going to start a fresh new chat for us as well. And what I'm going to do is I want to go and open a set of files. So I know then to understand a little bit more about which one are the constructors that have most wins per circuits. I need to look at about a bunch of SQL files I have. So the first one is races. Also want to get results in, and I want to look at probably construction data as well. And of course, we need circuit too. So now what I want to do is effectively use the agent again. And this time I want to use a combination of these four models to generate my final output. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab another prompt here from my notes. And so can you create a DBT model that helps me understand who is the constructor that won most races in each circuit? Now, one thing we can do, we have this additional option here, which is add active files to context. By doing so, it means that automatically all the four files that I had open in my current browsers, they'll be added to the context itself. And I can go ahead and press send now. So what we expect now the agent to do is to look at the content of these files, come up with what is the most sort of like optimal business logic to ultimately get to the answer that I'm after, which is understanding per race which one was the constructors that won the most. And after doing so, it's going to start looking at creating our DBT model itself. Now, what I'm expecting to do here is come up with the business logic and also start looking at our .dinorules. Again, with the additional prompt I provided around documentation, descriptions, how to structure CTEs, and so on, and making sure that there are additional rules applied here. So if you can see, we added some additional documentation within the CTs itself. So then the CTs are a bit more readable for somebody than it's just looking at the code, which is pretty good. And again, it went back on making sure that all the SQL keywords were uppercase. So all these sort of things that are there to make sure that the code is also more readable. If you go back to the dinorules itself, let me go and pull them up again. What we also see is, okay, we have a specific naming convention about around files they want to structure. So we keep that in place. And this sort of like get us to have the model that was just generated by us. So I want to go ahead and click on accept now. And let's see the next thing up there. So now that we accepted and generate this, based on the request I made in my prompt, it's now telling, okay, now because this is somewhat complex logic, I'm also going to go and create a Mermaid file for you. So I can go ahead and accept. This is the Mermaid file. This is what we support in Paradime as a Mermaid integration, which means that as code, we can define this diagram and this visualization. What we can do now, we can click on the little eye icon that we have here. And I'm just going to bring this up a little bit. And now on the back of that, I got lost focus on that side. Hold on. Here we go. Take it back. So now on the back of the rules that are put in place with dinorules, not only the DinoAI was able to generate the files and the code for us, but also because they identified this as being like a complex logic, because we have multiple joins and we're doing a bunch of calculation, it also automatically created for us this visualization to help us understand a little bit more about what was the business logic then that was used to ultimately get to our calculation. But think about, because this file is sitting in your repository, what the beauty of it is that this will be committed alongside my code, which means that if Parker or Costa will be looking at the business logic down the line, they can, of course, read to the code. They can use, of course, the DinoAI agent to do, like, explain my code to understand what it is. But then suddenly we have something very visual to understand a little bit more about how we went about building building our data model here. This is, I'm going to go ahead and accept this part, which as well is about documentation. So while we're talking, the agent, which is pretty good, very autonomous, he went and also created a bunch of documentation for us based on the rules I had in place as well. And I'll make this more visible in a second. I'm just going to drop or close a bunch of files that I have in place here. Okay. Okay. A lot of things open. Okay, here we go. So on the back of this, based on the prompt I had, we said, okay, when you're creating models, make sure that you add documentation, make sure that you follow a certain rules or guide within the files. Really here, you went and also created the YAML files based on the instruction I provided, right? Which was, let me go back and open the dinorules here, which was, each DBT model should have a documentation in its own file. So you didn't go and try and add in the standard schema.yaml file format. And also the YAML file containing documentation should start with an underscore and then the model name, for example, underscore fact orders of YAML. So it respected my naming convention about how I want the documentation to be generated by the agent itself, without having the agent second guessing what I like, but again, creating the standard, making sure that people follow a similar approach. And it went and create my March folder with the Formula 1 data. And in here now I have this 3-layer of artifacts that was created by the agent itself. So of course we have the SQL model. I have the Mermaid diagram to help me understand more about how the business logic was created. And ultimately, I also have the documentation with a bunch of like pre-built or preset tests that were set for me on the back of that. So of course, this is sort of like the first pass, like we're creating something new, we're working with a completely new set of models, all good and great. But now what I also want to do is I want to make sure that also these other models I have here, and if you see here, these like old models I've created before. They don't follow anymore the structure I provide in the dinorules, right? So those are different at this point. So what this allows me to do is a couple of things, really. Let's say we take as an example stage F1 circuit. So I can go here and say, maybe I'll create a new chat from scratch. Say, can you update this model using my new rules in here? And I can go and search. Actually, it's open file. This should do. Let's go. Now, basically, I'm saying, hey, I have a bunch of new rules. Can you go and look for the styles that I have in place? And can you update this model so that you have uppercase equal keyword, trailing commas, proper indentation, all the stuff that I've asked before, right? And again, it went, and now you see the file diff that we have here. It actually replaced, keeping the same business logic, so there are no changes there. But because of the rules I have in my dinorules files, we were able to go and update my model with everything new that I've asked for. Again, when we talk about the power and how dinorules can be powerful as part of our workflow is not only when we build new things, but I'm sure we all have some degree of projects that are hard to maintain and we have many files. How do we go about doing this on our day-to-day? Well, now with dinorules, this is possible because we can have a very consistent approach in the way how we build new code, but also how we can go back and do refactoring and make sure that if we go and find some incorrect or non-appropriate way to have our SQL written, we can actually take this and use the agent for it. The last thing I want to show is that, of course, with context and rules in general, and we don't have to go and do this file by file or model by model, right? So one thing we can do now is if I go and say, I want to ensure that, for example, let's see which file should we pick. Intermediate, actually, let's take staging, right? So I want to go here now and say, I want to make sure that all the models that are inside this folder needs to be updated to follow the rule I want. I can again use the additional context alongside the rules that we have, select directories, and now I want to look for our models.staging folder I have here, and now press enter. So on the back of this, now we can do bulk changes, right? So the agent is going to go and look at those files inside these folders one by one, and it's going to say, okay, I know that I have certain rules you have to follow. You want me to follow. I know that in these files, they don't look exactly like that. So I can go ahead and do this one by one at a time, making sure that all this new naming convention, all this new structure, all these new things that we want our model to look like, they'll be ultimately generated for us. So again, it's a pretty seamless and fast experience to do all this renaming that otherwise will take us a pretty long time. So yeah, as we maybe can take a few questions if there are any, we can see how the agent is going to keep working for us, which is the beauty of it.
It will keep working while we keep talking.
Exactly. Here we go.
Fabio, could you go back to the dinorules file? I have a question about that.
Definitely.
So does the dinorules file, does it have to have a certain type of style or indentation like a YAML file, or is it more like a Word document?
Actually, very good question. No, it's anything you like in there. I use bullet points; it's just easier for me to read. But there is no specific convention that you need to use. I prefer to separate things by paragraph, but fundamentally, you can have a long form written text there as well. That's totally fine. It's a simple set of instructions ultimately that will feed into our system prompt.
And in the process of using the agent, correct me if this is what's happening. So you add a prompt. Is the DinoAI agent immediately looking at the dinorules file and saying, okay, these are my instructions, these are my constraints, and then it's solving the problem?
Correct. Yeah. So when we start a new conversation, it will load and load the rules that we provide, so that on the back it's able to basically give us the best answer based on our rules and the prompt, of course, that we send back to the agent.
Okay, great. And that process of So most of what you just demonstrated are updating documentation with the specific rules that you gave in DinoAI, as well as reformatting SQL. That process, if you were to do it manually, even if you were just to do it, which is now the traditional method of just using like Claude or ChatGPT and giving those rules, copying and pasting the files, and then bringing them back in. That process probably takes an hour to update all the files. This process that you just demonstrated takes at least 50% less time. Again, Kalsov's going to disagree. He's going to say it's 99% faster.
We'll say 99% faster so everyone is on the call. But no, I think there are two sides of this, right? One is what I've just shown, like you're doing refactoring, you're doing some like restructuring of your DBT project, which is, it definitely saves you a lot of time, that's for sure. But I also think that enables us to focus on building business logic without having to think too much about the form, right? And I think that's where the value of this is, because I mean, I bet nobody follows proper indentation while you are like exploring your data and you're doing joins and you're writing SQL. You want to be in the flow, right? You want to just write SQL and see the results. That's your goal, so that you can understand if what you're building makes sense and so on. Then usually what we need to do is, okay, now we're done with writing SQL, and now I need to pour that code into a DBT model, right? And that's where I need to start to manually do the indent and doing a bit of re-aliasing, make sure that I follow the right structure. That's a very time-consuming task where truly there is no added value, if you think about it, right? Like you already built your business logic, things works, you're happy with it, and you're doing all that work. It's not just, it's important, but you're doing all that work to make sure that the code is more readable for somebody else. The SQL engine doesn't really care if using uppercase, lowercase, right? But what we do care is to make sure that we follow the structure within our project, that we follow certain naming convention. And I personally think that it's such a waste of time to having to do that manually nowadays. It's just it's time saying that you don't provide any additional value to organization if you do uppercase or lowercase. But of course, certain standard will make it easier to read and easier to build.
I guess the way to kind of think about it is that nobody is going to give you time to improve the readability of your code, but you still need to spend time to improve the readability of your code, because otherwise it becomes super hard to work with it. Hence, and it becomes super clunky to work with it. But you still need to find that time out somehow to do that. Now, will you ever get that time? Nobody gets. You will never probably get that time, because you are overloaded with day-to-day deliverables. So within that constraint, how can you actually have good development practices? And what we are seeing here is you can have good development practices, high quality repositories of DBT code, without actually spending a non-trivial amount of time behind it. People do like documentation sprints. So that's like 2 weeks of everyone trying to write documentation. And if you have a team of
Fabio
4,
just did a documentation sprint. This one just happened to take 5 minutes.
yeah, this is like a true sprint. You're just sprinting
Yeah.
through, you know. But teams spend 5 days, 7 days doing sprints of writing, putting their documentation in order. Or you have a repository of 300 models and you need to get the right style in place.
If someone is a current Paradime user and they're not using dinorules, question for either of you: what do you think is a good starting point? What should they add to dinorules immediately that can produce value quickly?
I think indentation and whether to go uppercase, lowercase, what kind of SQL keyword structure you want to use there, that's a pretty good start. And it's something you'll see the impact right away, right? Personally, I think what is very important also is to make sure that we have this additional prompt around how do we do documentation, what kind of tests we have in place, how do we want to generate tests. It's super easy to go and generate a bunch of tests which are potentially relevant for our use case, right? But how we can ultimately define in our business what do we want to test and how, so that when the agent is going to pick up and generate models, or if we want to just point it to an existing model, the test cases then it's going to generate for us in the YAML, they're a lot more compelling for what we're after. Those are probably a couple of things that are a good start with it. I think here I have one around making sure that we always use CTEs over subqueries. I think this is a burning point for a lot of teams. You have developers, and they come from one background, and they use a lot of subqueries, and some use CTEs. Again, we know that CTEs are a lot more readable, and it's very hard to force somebody to change their behavior in the way they write SQL, because I just write the way you like. We don't care. But when you're actually going to push this into Paradime to create your commits, then it's going to, the DinoAI rules is going to take care of unfolding that for you, so that you're still going to write code in the way you like, but ultimately you're going to bring that standard up for everyone else in the team.
And one I think I'd add is anytime that a SQL function is being used, and in that SQL function, when you read it, it doesn't read like English, you can say add a comment above that that explains what's happening in this step of the process.
Correct. Yeah.
So it can make your SQL more readable, and it can just make, if during the process of CI/CD, whatever, when someone's reviewing your code, you can just have the AI write comments that make it a lot more digestible.
Also, like the Mermaid diagram that we generated, right? GitHub natively, pretty much all Git repos natively support visualizing Mermaid diagrams. So let's say you have the complex logic documented as well, which means that anyone who is reviewing the PR will actually also see the Mermaid diagram in their GitHub. So it just means CI/CD will be faster. You know what's happening in the code in when you have complex joins and complex business logic being put together.
So what we've covered today is, well, I guess what we covered through the 3 sessions, because they really all intertwine, is a few weeks ago we introduced just how this agent works, how you can write and execute SQL that's very context specific. This agent understands your data warehouse, so it's not just providing you generic SQL code. It's providing you SQL and DBT code that's very specific to your DBT project, to your data warehouse, to your schemas. And now we just introduced how to create guardrails around that. So in addition to all the context that DinoAI has about your DBT project and data warehouse, you can add any number of rules to make it more efficient. And yeah, what do we want to, we haven't discussed what we want to cover next week, but we are going to cover something next week DinoAI related. What are we thinking?
First.
We have a question, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so where did DinoAI get the documentation information from? Did it infer from the naming, or was there some existing documentation which it used?
Very good question. So it's twofold. One is it definitely infers from the naming of our columns, as well as the business logic that is implemented in SQL, which is one part. But also, we are fetching metadata from your Snowflake tables. So what we always suggest is that documentation should start at source. So when we have a source data, we should add comment to our table metadata, which is something in Snowflake does support, so that business logic of what a race ID means, although it's pretty obvious, it means that the agent can pick that metadata from Snowflake itself at source and traverse that all the way through in terms of knowledge to the final models.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so if you already have context in the sources.yaml, then it'll reference that when you create downstream models.
It will definitely do, but also think about that sources in the DBT context is just a schema with some table in there. And usually the tables are generated from ingestion tools, whether it's various different tools and provide those functionality, what you can do is you can document the sources outside of dbt as well. So Snowflake can have its own context, and we pull that context within Paradime. We make that available to the agent so that if you have comments within your Snowflake warehouse metadata, that is accessible to Paradime.
David, if that answered your question, great. If not, we are happy to take any follow-up questions. I think we're about 15 seconds delayed on the actual live stream, so we'll just give it a little time.
Right.
So next week, my vote is for our next hackathon. I'll find whatever data set we'll use for that next hackathon, and then I'll show the process of building that with DinoAI. Like what I said, it would take 15 hours setting up a project. This one will take 1 hour. We'll actually verify. Then that gives Kyle and I a competition. Does it take 15 minutes? Does it take 30 minutes? We'll find out.
Should take 10 minutes. We'll be done.
Okay, great, David. Thank you. And with that, is there anything else we want to say before we sign off?
No, this is great. I mean, like as we've seen, AI is super powerful when you give it the right context with the right information, and some cases counterintuitively ring fence it a little bit with the right context. You get remarkably great output, and it just saves so many hours of work, and just accelerates your productivity by orders of magnitude. So yeah, it's amazing. I'm impressed every day by what we can accomplish.
Same. It's
Totally.
awesome. It's entertaining. It's fun. It's useful. It's kind of all the things we hope it would be, and we're going to keep improving it every week.
Yeah, stay tuned for the next live stream or so, because there are going to be a lot of more exciting things. Can't tell much. Just make sure you join the next one.
Perfect.
Cool.
See you guys. Thank you. Thank you for joining.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers. Bye.